Yo, 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 what is going on, people? How are we doing today? Today, very special day. We are doing. We're doing some fun. Okay. Scroll down here. And yep, that's working. It's interesting. You are now. Okay. You are now. Okay. And then we'll go over to the YouTube platform, and then we will pin that on the YouTube platform as always. Oh, okay. Oh, it's not good. Oh, that's why. That's why we're not there. Tipliv URL. Okay, vertical right here. Tipliv URL. Okay, vertical right here. Alright, so everything we got going down, working. Alright, so what's going on, y'all? We are live today doing a standard YouTube stream. And today we are just gonna be watching some shit, you know. Let's read this just so I can see this a little bit more. Alright, so got that locked, interact. Okay. This could be my main screen right here, genuinely. Or like, mostly main screen. And I can see it a lot better. So let's see what we want to watch. I was ready to count as disturbed mysteriously. Oh, wow, okay, wait. Hello. That's good. Okay, no. I'm confused. What the fuck? Okay, hold the phone. Properties. No, not that. These properties. Okay. It's bad. Oh, thank God. Fixed. Instantly fixed.
Was officially reported missing at around. I'm looking for.
Okay, that's pretty decent.
These communities were.
Okay.
Okay, now everything can be heard good.
That night, Stearns showed deputies the spot where he says
Okay,
Madeline
this
got
is
out of
the
his
good
car,
YouTube. Let me just
Silver
save this
Lincoln
shit.
MKZ.
She had also left her phone at home that morning and didn't have a smartwatch or any other trackable devices on her. But just as the situation was starting to look hopeless, investigators found their first lead. Going through her phone revealed messages she sent to her friends where she talked about running away and living in the woods after she turned 13. This prompted a much wider search across the many hiking trails and wooded areas around the school, which unfortunately also led nowhere. With no other options, investigators turned their attention back towards immediate family, and especially Stefan. He was the last person who saw Maddie, turning him into a prime suspect in her disappearance. Stefan, however, stuck to his story.
When I left her, she was on the other side of the street, rummaging through her backpack and just kind of moving towards the school area, so.
In the meantime, Jennifer went to the media to help spread the word about her missing daughter.
I want her to be okay, and I want her to be safe. I don't want her to come back harmed. I just want her back, whatever that means. I just want her back.
What she didn't know was that the person responsible for Maddie's disappearance was sitting right beside her. You see, Stefan had told the officers about multiple locations he went to after dropping off Maddie before returning home, including a vape shop and a game store. But when officers checked CCTV footage, they saw him driving in the area, but never entering any of the places he claimed to have visited, almost as if he was just creating potential alibis in case he was ever questioned. CCTV footage around his apartment complex also showed him making a stop and discarding items into a dumpster before driving away, something he didn't mention at all during questioning. When investigators checked the dumpster, they found a school backpack containing Maddie's purple hoodie and her school laptop. This resulted in Stefan getting arrested on the morning of February 28, but many aspects of the case were still unknown. The final piece of the puzzle was discovered on February 29th when police discovered CCTV footage of Stefan driving with Maddie strapped in the front seat. However, she was slumped over, indicating that she was likely knocked out. This made even more sense when investigators also found a purchase record of him buying sevoflurane from Walmart 2 days before Maddie went missing. Sevoflurane, for those who don't know, is a medical anesthetic similar to chloroform. Footage from a hotel's parking lot also showed him taking her out of the front seat and putting her in the trunk. Then, on the 1st of March, investigators received a tip from someone who saw him changing his car's tire on Hickory Tree Road on the morning of February 26, and a search of the area revealed that him having to stop on the road wasn't a coincidence. In a wooded area just off the road, officers found the remains of Maddie, hidden under some grass, confirming Jennifer's worst fear. Stefan was charged with first-degree murder and was sentenced to 21 life sentences without parole in July 2024. With the pictures of Maddie he previously posted on his now abandoned Reddit account serving as a constant reminder of his heinous crime. On September 30, 2017, Reddit user KillaCun made a post on the stand-up comedy subreddit talking about the passing of comedian Patrice O'Neal. Patrice O'Neal doesn't get the proper recognition he deserves. If not for his unfortunate, untimely early passing, he would without a doubt be considered the greatest comedian of all time. And while many agreed with him in the comments, the top reply had a different tone. If not for his unfortunate, untimely early passing. Yeah, like your son? This comment was referring to the tragedy that happened just 3 days after this post. Almost a year before this post, the OP posted a picture of a baby holding a computer mouse to his ear titled, "My son thinks everything is a phone." It was a very innocent, wholesome post. Sadly, a year later, it would become a reminder of the horrific incident that happened on October 3, 2017. That day, 27-year-old Christopher Kuhn, the man behind the Kill a Kuhn account, took his then 2-year-old son to the Levittown Town Center Walmart in Pennsylvania. But he wasn't there to shop. Immediately after entering the store, Christopher tried to shoplift a $228 soundbar. He was confronted by security officers trying to stop him from leaving. Security also called the police, resulting in him getting more scared, shouting, "You can't hold me here," and rushing back to his car with his 2-year-old son. The son climbed into the back seat, leading Christopher to make the worst mistake he could have made in that situation. He forgot to strap him into the toddler seat. Instead, he climbed into the driver's seat and sped off. He wasn't even being chased by the police yet, but he kept driving at an unsafe speed. He then tried to run a red light at an intersection just a few hundred feet from the Walmart. Unfortunately, that's where his luck ran out. In an effort to flee the scene, he T-boned another vehicle, resulting in his car rolling over. Christopher himself was buckled in, allowing him to come out of the crash with minimal injuries. Sadly, his son was ejected from the car and landed violently on the roadway, passing away on the spot. Witnesses also saw Christopher stepping out of the car and looking at the remains of his own son before continuing to flee on foot. Fortunately, the police arrived at the scene moments later and arrested Christopher, who was trying to hide in the plants next to the road. Further investigation revealed that he was under the influence of drugs, which may have contributed to his erratic behavior. Christopher also turned out to have an extensive criminal record, including theft, fraud, terroristic threats against his wife, and many more. He was also driving with a suspended license due to prior drug possession. He stood trial on March 28, 2018 on charges of third-degree murder, child endangerment, and others. He was later sentenced to 8.5 to 30 years in prison, and as far as I was able to find, he remains behind bars with no reports of his release. On the 11th of August 2018, Reddit user Galpticos posted a very run-of-the-mill meme on the Dank Memes subreddit. There was nothing too notable about it, and it received little attention at the time. But if you visit the post today, you'll see strange comments like, "Bro, this is crazy. The history behind this guy is actually insane. This is actually disturbing. He's probably in hell now." They seem very out of place at first, but learning what the owner of this account did, they're not all that surprising. You see, there were two constants on the Galpticos Reddit account, Fortnite and depression. The owner of the account, 19-year-old Farhan Tawheed, often discussed his mental health struggles with others on the site, and things seemed to be looking up for him. One of the most recent comments on his account was a reply to a post asking depressed people how they were doing that day, to which Farhan replied, "The past few weeks have been great. I finally moved on from 2 toxic relationships that I was trying to hold on to for way too long. Thanks for asking." It looked like he was looking forward to improving his life. Unfortunately, that's not how things played out. The incident happened on the night of April 5th at around 1 a.m. when Farhan posted a Google Drive link to his Instagram. Inside was a 7-page document detailing what he was about to do and why. It opened with the chilling line, "Hey everyone, I killed myself and my family. If I'm going to die, I might as well get some attention." The rest of the document went on to detail the plan he made with his brother to purchase guns and take out the rest of his family when the time came. He talked about how his depression had persisted for most of his life, and that there were many people who tried to help him, but they all failed and eventually ended up ghosting him. In a segment about happiness, he wrote, "It's not fair. I did everything right, every little thing right, and I'm still just apathetic. Everyone's allowed to worry about their future, and I can't even think about what I'm going to do tomorrow without enduring an existential crisis. It's not fair how everyone can be so content while I can't even fathom being happy. No matter what I do, I just can't be happy." He also mentioned his reason for ending his family as well, which essentially boiled down to they'll be sad after he's gone, so this is a better option. He was clearly facing serious mental struggles, but at this point it was already too late. One of his friends noticed the concerning Instagram post and requested a welfare check. Officers arrived at the scene just a few minutes later. Unfortunately, there was nothing they could do. The house was fully locked, and by the time they managed to break in, all 6 family members had already passed away from gunshot wounds, leaving Farhan's abandoned Reddit account as a snapshot of how he felt leading up to the brutal massacre.
That's terrifying.
N.M. Wrights, or Nicholas Cassotis, became a prominent horror fiction writer on Reddit in 2019, with some of his stories receiving tens of thousands of upvotes. What none of his readers knew, however, was that the writer of these fictional horror stories would end up living through something similar himself. As a fan's comment on his last post on Reddit states, "You were always a good writer, but a bad husband." His crime first came to light on December 2nd, 2022, when a group of hunters found a human torso inside a plastic container at a hunting park in Riceboro, Georgia. When police arrived at the scene, they found another plastic container and a knife nearby. A more thorough search of the area also revealed several other dismembered parts of the same person, scattered in a 3-mile radius of the initial finding. Unfortunately, it took until May 11 to identify the person through DNA testing. This turned out to be Mindy Cassotis, a 40-year-old woman from Savannah, Georgia. The very next day, police arrested 4-year-old Nicholas Cassotis, known online as N.M. Wrights, as the prime suspect in the case. He was married to another woman named Samantha by this point and was living with her in Pennsylvania. Investigation into his past revealed that Mindy Cassotis was actually his second wife. He got divorced from his first wife and was ordered to pay $1.5 million in alimony in 2016. But instead of paying the amount, he went on the run and married Mindy the same year. They ended up moving to many different places over the years, eventually settling in an Airbnb with her parents in Savannah, Georgia. Then, on the 1st of December 2022, he told her parents that she went to the hospital for high blood pressure related issues. There, the situation got worse and she ended up passing away due to a stroke. Not long after that, he moved to Pennsylvania to marry Samantha, his now third wife. This appeared to be a very open and shut case of him taking the life of his wife and running away to a new location to hide. He stood trial on August 5, 2025, and that's when he came out with his version of what happened, which to any of his readers sounded like another one of the fictional stories he used to write on Reddit. According to Nick, his name appeared in a 2016 article about exposing a scandal in the US military. Looking through that article now, it shows that his name was only mentioned in passing and had little to do with the scandal. But according to Nick, he started experiencing strange occurrences after this mention, like unauthorized charges on his bank account or mail disappearing from his mailbox. So he contacted the FBI, and that's when he met an FBI agent named Jim McIntyre. Nick claimed that Jim became his handler from that point on. He managed his finances, helped him move several times to avoid the powerful people who were after him, and even helped him sell one of his horror stories to Sony. Jim even went as far as to get him a remote job at a software company. This resulted in him and Mindy fully trusting Jim and doing everything he said, even sticking with him through disagreements.
But you didn't cut ties with Jim, correct?
We did not. No, Mindy felt that Jim was our, our angel. She said, he had made mistakes, but we would be in the position to fix all those mistakes. And if we stopped working together, then who knows, if his resolve to see this end in our favor was going to go away,
Nick then told the same story he told her parents, that she went to the hospital for a checkup and ended up passing away. He also added that the hospital had cremated her remains before he could see her. Mindy's mother later testified that she believed Nick because she had no reason not to. He also told her that Mindy likely died due to the carelessness of a nurse and that he was going to file a lawsuit against the hospital. But instead of following through, he left her house not long after. This story he was giving already sounded like fiction by this point. But Nick stayed adamant that every part of it was true. Maybe he thought this would be enough to convince the jury of his innocence, especially since there was no direct proof of his involvement. Unfortunately for him, the prosecution came prepared with undeniable circumstantial evidence. For instance, purchase records revealed that he bought things like latex gloves, a shovel, and a hunting knife set leading up to the crime. Cell phone data also showed that his car was present at the hunting park in Riceboro, Georgia on December 1st. Most importantly, investigators discovered that he was in a relationship with Samantha while he was still married to Mindy. He likely wanted to be with Samantha but didn't want to go through the divorce process again, so he decided to end her life instead. He also tried to cover his tracks by sending an email to Mindy's parents from a burner email account, claiming that he had died in an accident just so they wouldn't think of coming after him. Nick believed that writing horror stories about familial crimes gave him the ability to lie his way out of the consequences of his actions. Fortunately, he was sorely mistaken. The trial ended on August 14, 2025, and he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole.
That's crazy shit. Alright, let's see. Their video. That was pretty cool. YouTube. Interact. Go back to Chilling Scares, honestly.
Roller coaster decapitation. Six Flags is an amusement park company that operates many theme and water parks around the US. Georgia is home to one of these locations and receives millions of visitors each year. What many of these visitors don't realize, however, is that one of the rides has led to 2 different people losing their lives in the most brutal way possible. The more notable of these incidents happened on the 28th of June 2008. The day started off completely normal, but that changed at 1:50 p.m. when park authorities discovered the remains of a young man under the Batman-themed ride. These remains belonged to 17-year-old Isaiah Ferguson. He was visiting the park with his family and a group from his local church.
Oh, shit.
According to witnesses, Isaiah and another boy ignored the many danger signs under the coaster and entered the restricted zone by scaling the 2 6-foot-high fences surrounding it. It's possible they thought they'd be safe as long as they were under the rails and not climbing on anything, which would have been the case for most normal coasters. Unfortunately for them, the Batman-themed ride featured an inverted design, where the seats were suspended beneath the track rather than mounted on a car above it. The ride was also running at the time, and it did not end well for Isaiah. I saw a man run from the building towards the fence. He jumped the fence and ran under the ride. He was hit by the ride or a person on the ride and fell forward. He didn't get up. You heard a big pop and he just laid there. The ride was going at over 50 miles per hour, or roughly 80 kilometers per hour, when the leg of one of the passengers made contact with Isaiah's head, decapitating him instantly. The rider somehow was fortunately unharmed. As it turned out, this was not the first incident involving the Batman ride. 6 years earlier, on May 26, 2002, a 58-year-old park employee lost his life in the exact same way when he was struck by the leg of a 14-year-old girl. Again, the rider was able to recover without any permanent injuries. A later investigation also cleared the park of any negligence. Inspectors found plenty of warnings and physical barriers in place to prevent anyone from simply wandering into the danger zone. As for why Isaiah chose to ignore those warnings and climb the fence, that remains unclear to this day. Police received some conflicting reports, with some claiming that he was trying to retrieve a hat he had lost on the ride earlier, while others said he was attempting to touch the coaster or grab a rider's foot as a dare. But none of these reports were ever confirmed. And since the park wasn't found guilty of any wrongdoing, the Batman ride was allowed to reopen just a few days after the incident, and it's still operational to this day. Though now with a lot more warning signs and barbed wire over the fences to prevent any more similar tragedies. Murder of Oki Al-Qaid. On May 24, 2004, employees at an engineering consulting firm in Denver, Colorado noticed that the project manager, 53-year-old Oki Al-Qaid, was absent. This was completely out of character for Al, as he rarely ever took a day off. Even when he did, he made sure to inform his colleagues beforehand to avoid any issues. So people from the office tried calling him on the phone, but despite multiple attempts, Al didn't answer. Worried for his safety, people at the office contacted his emergency contact, which belonged to his sister. Unfortunately, the sister lived too far away to check on Al herself, so she dialed 911 and requested a welfare check instead, desperately hoping that her brother was okay. She knew something was wrong, since it wasn't like her brother to ghost everyone out of nowhere, but nothing could have prepared her for the gruesome fate Al had met in his own home just days earlier. When officers arrived at the house in Aurora, Colorado, they discovered that it was spotless, almost as if someone had recently given it a thorough cleaning, but there were no signs of Al himself. That is, until they went down to the basement and discovered one of the most horrific sights ever documented. The basement contained the bloody remains of Oki Al-Qaid with numerous, nightmarish injuries. Later reports confirmed that he had over 20 stab wounds across his body, but this was only the very beginning. According to the investigation, Al had likely been brutally tortured by the killer leading up to his death. The details of the crime scene were so horrific that they were never fully released to the public. Whoever did this to Al spent hours upon hours inflicting pain before taking his life.
Whoa.
This alone was enough to make it one of the most disturbing cases in Aurora's history. But the deeper investigators looked into it, the more unsettling it became. And at the center of it all was a mysterious man named Robert Cooper. His name first came up when talking to Al's girlfriend Linda, who was out of state at the time. She revealed that Al had told her about renting out his basement to a guy named Robert Cooper. She had actually seen the guy a few days earlier when Al was giving him a tour of the place, but as soon as Robert saw Linda, he left without even looking at her. He was likely trying to avoid leaving any witnesses. Fortunately, Linda was able to see enough of his face to help detectives put together a crude sketch. She also revealed that he had a cane and was walking with a limp. A quick search of Al's home revealed a document in his kitchen dustbin with all of Robert's information on it. But as it turned out, all of this was completely fake. Another factor that complicated the case was the sheer lack of a motive. Investigators initially assumed that it was a robbery gone wrong since Al's truck, phone, and wallet were missing. However, the truck was found just a couple of blocks from his home the very next day. And while the suspect did use Al's bank card, he only withdrew $1,000, far below the amount of money Al had in his account. Pictures from the ATM camera showed him wearing a ski mask and gloves to completely hide his identity. Robert had also given $750 in cash to Al just a day earlier for a security deposit and first month's rent. So, committing such a horrific crime for the difference of $250 didn't make much sense. Investigators later concluded that withdrawing this money was likely his way of taunting the police by leaving clues that he knew would ultimately do nothing for the police. By this point, it was clear that investigators were dealing with a highly prepared killer who had taken every precaution to conceal his identity. Even when officers tracked down the phone he used to contact Al, it turned out to be a burner phone. Not only that, but Robert had bought it with cash from a local convenience store and waited 30 days to activate it, knowing that most stores erased old CCTV footage after a month. Analysis of his phone revealed that he had also contacted several other landlords before Al. He likely went after Al because he knew Al lived alone. However, talking to those other landlords complicated things further, since many of them described characteristics that were the complete opposite of Linda's account, like many claiming that he didn't have a cane and walked normally. Some also claimed that he was much younger than Linda had described. At the end of the day, investigators weren't able to find a single solid lead or motive pointing to Robert Cooper's real identity. They even found a drop of blood on the basement stairs, but the DNA sample didn't match any existing records, leaving the question of why Al Kite was targeted and killed in such a horrific way as an unsolved mystery to this day. Human meat killer. On December 15, 1996, a man in Baltimore, Maryland walked into the local police station with a grim confession. According to this man, one of his friends had asked him to help dispose of a woman's remains. And while this sounded a bit absurd at first, officers decided to accompany him to the location. And to their surprise, the man wasn't lying. Deep inside a wooden pallet factory, police discovered the remains of 23-year-old Kimberly Lynn Spicer, who had been missing since November of that year. There was still a possibility that the man who went to the police was trying to frame his friend for a crime he committed. However, any doubt officers had in him vanished as soon as he named his friend, 41-year-old Joe Matheny. Those who knew Joe personally described him as kind and compassionate, but to the police, he couldn't have been more different. You see, Joe was actually arrested back in August 1995 for allegedly taking the lives of 2 homeless men. However, the case was thrown out in July 1996 due to insufficient evidence. More importantly, the police were already investigating Joe for an incident that had occurred just a week earlier on December 8. That night, a woman named Rita Kemper accused him of kidnapping and attempted murder, allegedly threatening her by saying, "I'm going to kill you and bury you in the woods with the other girls." So, the police had every reason to suspect that Joe was responsible for Kimberly's death as well. They arrested him the same day and charged him with murder. But Joe's crimes would turn out to be far more horrific. While in custody, Joe confessed to taking the lives of more than 10 victims, including the 2 homeless men he was charged with earlier. He also showed zero remorse, stating that he killed because he, quote, enjoyed it. Further adding, "I got a rush out of it, got a high out of it, call it what you want. I had no real excuse why other than I like to do it." That said, when investigators went searching for the remains of these victims, most of them were missing from where Joe claimed they were. And while this was never confirmed in court, there was an extremely horrific explanation for those missing remains. Put simply, while behind bars, Joe confessed to processing his victims' remains and feeding them to ordinary people back when he was operating a grilled meat stand. He wrote, "The human body tastes very similar to pork. If you mix it together, no one can tell the difference. So, the next time you're riding down the road and you happen to see an open pit beef stand that you've never seen before, make sure you think about this story before you take a bite of that sandwich." He stood trial multiple times in 1997 and 1998 and was initially given the death penalty, but this decision was later overturned and he was resentenced to 2 consecutive life sentences without the possibility of parole. He remained in prison until his death on August 5th, 2017. Heart attack caught on camera. Alain Bruno started on YouTube with random vlogs, skits, and lifestyle videos back in 2012. These videos didn't gain much attention, but he kept posting semi-regularly for the next couple of years, unaware that one day he would record the worst incident of his life on camera. It happened somewhere near the end of May 2015. Alain was recording another one of his videos, when suddenly he started feeling an uncomfortable pain around his chest and shoulders. What Alain didn't know at the time was that he was having a heart attack, and it was getting worse as time went on.
That's rough.
Soon he was struggling to breathe and was constantly rubbing his chest and shoulders to alleviate pain, but none of it was working. The pain kept getting worse and worse, resulting in him nearly passing out and drowning in his bathtub at one point.
Oh my god, that's horrible. They shouldn't even show this shit. It's horrible. That's fucking horrible.
He eventually summoned enough strength to get out of the tub, only to nearly pass out on the bathroom floor seconds later. What made this situation even worse was that he was completely alone in the house. Left alone, he would have more than likely passed away before anyone noticed. But in what was nothing short of a miracle, his roommate came home early that day and immediately called 911. Alain was rushed to the hospital where he managed to survive and is still posting videos to this day. However, while Alain was able to recover after experiencing a heart attack, nearly 20 million people lose this battle every year. And therein lies the true horror of heart attacks. One minute you're living your life, maybe filming a video or laughing at a joke, and the next your heart stalls. You feel this heavy, crushing weight on your chest, pressing your lungs, and there is absolutely nothing you can do to get it off. It's the result of your heart muscle literally suffocating because it's being starved of oxygen-rich blood. As the minutes tick by, the sensation radiates through the rest of your upper body. Your lungs feel heavy, and no matter how deep you gasp, the air feels thin and useless. But the pain isn't even the worst part. It's the sheer dread and the impending sense of doom that survivors often describe as the most terrifying part of their experience. Your brain knows you are about to die before your heart even stops. And unlike many
I
other
don't want to
deadly
see all this shit.
conditions
This
that
is
you can
fucked up, man.
predict
I gotta
or
fucking,
counteract,
I gotta lose
heart
weight,
attack
bro.
can
This is what
happen
this
at
tells
any
me.
time, often without warning, even in people who are otherwise healthy. And while modern medicine is quite effective at reducing the lethality of heart attacks, there's never a full guarantee treatment will arrive in time. Serial killer nurse. In early 2003, the staff at the Somerset Medical Center in Somerville, New Jersey noticed a few abnormalities with a couple of their patients, like a Catholic priest named Florian Gall who passed away completely out of nowhere. And when tested, staff found toxic levels of digoxin in his system, even though digoxin was never prescribed to him. Around the same time, another patient showed a sudden and unexplainable insulin spike and nearly lost their life. These and other similar incidents kickstarted an investigation, and nearly all of them linked back to the same man, 43-year-old Charles Cullen. The incidents weren't the exact same, but they all shared Charles as the common factor. In each case, the patient either mysteriously died or their condition became a lot worse after Charles spent a shift with them. This didn't make much sense at first. Charles had been a nurse for over 16 years and had a spotless record so far. However, the deeper investigators looked, the more suspicious his actions became. They found records of him requesting digoxin from the digital medicine dispensing machine and then canceling the request right after. But while the record never showed him taking the medicine out, doses of digoxin were still missing from the machine. There was simply too much circumstantial evidence against Charles for it to all be a massive coincidence. Unfortunately, none of this circumstantial evidence was solid enough to guarantee conviction. There was no CCTV footage or any other direct proof of his crimes. The only option now was to get him to confess. Luckily, investigators were able to convince one of his friends, another nurse named Amy Lochran, to wear a wire and coax a confession out of him. This worked better than investigators could have guessed. She invited him to lunch on December 12, 2003, and after some persuasion, got him to admit to intentionally killing his patients. This was enough for officers to arrest him on the spot and bring him in for questioning. He tried to stay quiet at first, but eventually admitted to taking the lives of 29 different patients during his time as a nurse. Though, according to some estimates, this number could be as high as 400. Charles would strategically choose night shifts with fewer prying eyes and opt to take care of victims who were less likely to survive. He would then either enter the code for some other medicine in the same drawer as digoxin, or cancel the request but then shake the machine open to steal the drug. He chose digoxin because it messed with the heart's rhythm in high doses, resulting in the victim dying of a natural-looking cause. He also knew that autopsies rarely tested for digoxin, reducing his risk of getting caught even further. However, the most disturbing part of the case is that his crimes were uncovered multiple times over the years. When the hospitals he worked at found out what he was doing, they didn't want to ruin their own reputation by launching a criminal investigation, so they simply fired him instead. This allowed him to work at 10 different hospitals and claim the lives of countless victims. When asked why he did it, Charles claimed that he wanted to relieve people of their suffering, even though most of his victims were either in stable conditions or died painful deaths because of his actions. Thankfully, he was caught in 2003. He stood trial in March 2006 and was sentenced to 18 consecutive life sentences, ensuring that he spends the rest of his life behind bars. The 2019 escape room incident. On January 4, 2019, a group of 5 15-year-old girls in Poland got together to celebrate one of their birthdays. They had decided to spend the afternoon at a local escape room. Escape rooms, for those who don't know, are an interactive group activity. The premise is to get locked in a small themed room, solve a series of puzzles, and find the key to escape before the timer runs out. When done correctly, it's a largely harmless activity with virtually no risk of injury. However, not every escape room is set up with safety in mind, which was also the case for the escape room the girls chose for their celebration. It was hosted in an old residential building that was later converted into an escape room business without proper modifications. Mainly, the rooms lacked a proper fire exit. The only way out was through the front door, which was left locked until they solved the puzzle to escape. Even the window was boarded up for decoration, making it completely inaccessible. The entire building was also being heated with a gas heater powered by portable cylinders, with the door to the escape room located right next to the heater. And while this setup had worked without any issues for dozens of attempts before, the same did not happen on the 4th of January. The girls arrived at the location around 4 p.m. and were locked inside the room not long after. At around 5 p.m., the only employee on duty noticed a whooshing sound coming from the heater. He tried to check for any leaks and fix them before things got out of hand. Unfortunately, as soon as he moved the cylinder, the leaking pipe caught fire and engulfed the entire wall immediately. He tried to reach the girl's door to unlock it, but the fire was already too intense. He suffered severe burns and was forced to retreat, cutting off the only evacuation route and leaving the girls entirely trapped. Inside the room, the teenagers were likely unaware of the danger at first, but soon, thick, toxic smoke began seeping through the cracks of the door. The temperature spiked and turned the room into a literal furnace. The girls were confined to a tiny, locked space and were entirely dependent on someone on the outside to let them out. Even if they had a way out, the thick smoke made it impossible to breathe, let alone open their eyes and find their way out. All they could do now was wait to be rescued, while the chance of them experiencing an unimaginable death increased with every second. One of the girls managed to call her father during the chaos, but the only words that came out of her mouth were "Dad, fire," before the line cut off. By the time firefighters extinguished the blaze and forced their way into the room, it was already too late. All 5 teenagers passed away, turning a harmless birthday outing into an unimaginable tragedy. Rabies. Few diseases in the world are more terrifying than rabies, mainly because once its symptoms appear, death is almost inevitable. However, that is far from the most disturbing aspect of the virus. The true horror of rabies lies in what it does to the human body before claiming a life. It starts with a bite from a stray dog, a raccoon, or even a minor scratch from a bat. Then, immediately after entering the body, the rabies virus starts traveling up the nervous system towards the brain. And until it reaches its target, the virus is almost invisible to the body. It doesn't trigger a massive immune response or cause immediate sickness. Even the original bite usually heals without any complications. This lack of immediate symptoms can deceive people into thinking that they're safe. By the time they realize they're infected, they're already too far gone. Because once the virus finally reaches the brain, it begins replicating itself quickly and starts spreading through the nervous system. And that's when the symptoms begin. Even then, it can start off fairly tame with symptoms like a low fever, a headache, and general fatigue, the same signs as the common flu. But before long, the virus begins actively destroying brain tissue, resulting in severe paranoia, confusion, and uncontrollable aggression. Victims become incredibly restless and begin suffering from insomnia and violent outbursts. Then comes the most horrific symptom of the disease, hydrophobia. You see, the virus spreads through saliva, so it increases the production of saliva. And to ensure that this saliva stays in the mouth, it makes the host extremely hydrophobic. It causes severe, agonizing spasms in the throat and larynx. These spasms are so violent that they're triggered by the mere thought, sight, or sound of water. You need water to survive, but the second you try to take a sip or even swallow your own saliva, your throat muscles violently contract, inducing a sensation identical to suffocating. Worst of all, this state of panic and aggression only gets worse as the virus progresses, until the human body can't take it anymore and shuts down completely. Now, modern medicine does have a highly effective vaccine. If you receive a series of shots immediately after a suspected bite, your chances of survival are nearly perfect. But the vaccine only works if administered before the virus reaches your brain. If you wait and even a single minor symptom appears, the mortality rate jumps to virtually 100%. There is no cure at this point. There is no last-minute medical save, resulting in 70,000 people falling victim to rabies every year, because once the first headache starts, you are already dead.
It was just a little get-together. It was her, out of time. It was the rush. It was the fuss. It was them, telling her she did way too much.
It was nothing.
Arby's walk-in freezer death. On the morning of May 11, 2023, 63-year-old Nuyet Lee was opening for an Arby's located in New Iberia, Louisiana. She arrived at the location at around 9 a.m. to prep for business before the 10 a.m. opening. This was a part of her daily routine as the manager and something she had done hundreds of times before. And today was supposed to be no different. Unfortunately, that's not what happened. Sometime after arriving at the location, Nuyet went inside the restaurant's massive walk-in freezer to retrieve some ingredients. But when she turned around to walk out, the door slammed shut, leaving her stuck in -10 degrees Fahrenheit. This was colder than many parts of the Antarctic, and unlike people who live in extremely frigid environments, she wasn't dressed for the cold. It wasn't until 6 hours later that her own son, who also worked at the same restaurant, found her inside the freezer. She was frozen solid on the freezer's floor, curled up into a fetal position. Her hands were bloody from trying to pry her way out for what must have felt like hours before hypothermia set in and she eventually passed away. A later investigation of the freezer revealed that the emergency latch that's meant to open the door from the inside was broken. She had also been working as the manager of an Arby's in Houston, Texas for several years, but was assigned a temporary position at the Louisiana location in February. So there's a good chance she didn't even know about the malfunctioning latch. These industrial walk-in freezers also have extremely thick walls, so no one could hear her cries for help either, leaving her to die alone in the dark, cold room. Sadly, Nuyet's case is only one of 60 similar cases that happen every year, where people get stuck inside a walk-in freezer and by the time someone notices, it's already too late. From the moment they become trapped until their final breath, people experience what can only be described as pure torture. It starts with their body quickly losing heat due to the extreme cold temperature. The frigid air makes it painful to breathe, and even the thin liquid layer on the eyes starts to freeze. This is followed by hypothermia, during which the body constricts blood vessels, raises the heart rate, and begins to shiver uncontrollably to generate heat. The lack of blood flow to the extremities can also lead to frostbite on fingers and toes, as the cells in those regions begin to die.
I don't want to look at that shit.
Near the final stages of hypothermia, the brain starts to malfunction, causing hallucinations, delirium, and extreme dizziness. By this point, the chances of survival are nearly zero, as the person begins to lose their sense of self before eventually passing away. The Gollum Cave Incident. On the morning of August 17, 2005, 5 students from Brigham Young University decided to explore a relatively unknown cave on the nearby Y Mountain in Utah. The small cave was called Gollum's Cave, but it also had a second name, as those who knew about it called it the Cave of Death. Confident in their knowledge of the cave's interior and their ability to navigate it, the 5 students decided to visit it anyway. Blake Donner, Ariel Singer, Scott McDonald, and Jennifer Galbraith arrived at the cave's entrance at around 4:30 a.m. and made preparations to go in. The 5th friend, Joseph Ferguson, decided at the last second not to join them and stayed outside. The others started to make their way in, one after the other, and just a few minutes later vanished completely into the cave. An important thing to note about Golem's cave is that it was only 100 feet, or about 30 meters in length. So the trip to its end and back should have taken 20 to 30 minutes at most. But over an hour had passed, and none of the four had returned. Worried about their safety, Joseph dialed 911 and told them about the situation. And it wasn't long before police and rescue officers were there, thinking up the best way to reach the four who were inside. Because the primary section of the Golem cave ended with a small water-filled hole, which then led to an air pocket further inside the cave. The tunnel leading to the air pocket was too narrow to turn around, forcing anyone inside to reach the very end before returning. Something the rescuers couldn't do with their equipment, like oxygen tanks. So instead of going in and possibly getting stuck, they decided to use an air pump to fill the cave with fresh air while also removing water. This not only supplied those stuck inside with fresh air, but also made the rescue mission much easier. What none of the rescuers knew was that it was already too late. Unfortunately, by the time rescuers reached the entrance to the underwater section, all four students were already dead. The question now was how. After removing the remains from the cave, rescuers returned to the air pocket at the very end to test the air quality. As they had feared, oxygen levels were critically low inside the air pocket. They weren't bad enough to prevent the four from breathing completely, but it was a big enough difference to impair their reasoning. This also made it difficult to hold their breath while trying to return, causing all four to become trapped in the short underwater section and drown before help could arrive. Asiana Airlines Flight 214 disaster. On the 6th of July 2013, Asiana Airlines Flight 214 was set to arrive at the San Francisco International Airport at around 11:30 a.m. The Boeing 777 plane had taken off from the Incheon International Airport near Seoul, South Korea about 10 hours earlier. And other than a 30-minute delay due to weather, the flight had gone exactly as planned. But this would change as they were about to land. As the plane approached the runway, it was 2,000 feet lower than it should have been. By the time the pilots realized their mistake, the plane was already too close to the ground. They tried to course correct at the last second, but that only made things worse. The plane crashed into the seawall, losing its tail and left engine in the process. The main body of the plane slid across the runway at extreme speeds before catching fire due to the jet fuel that was now spilling everywhere. Fortunately, with the crash happening near the airport, rescue workers were able to reach the scene in seconds. Of the 307 people on board, 187 were injured by the impact or the fire, and 3 lost their lives. However, among everyone on that plane, no one suffered a fate more tragic than 16-year-old Ye Mengyan. Ye wasn't wearing her seatbelt when the crash happened, resulting in her getting ejected onto the runway. She was severely injured, but according to the autopsy reports, she was still alive. She had survived such a violent event against all odds. There was a strong chance of her pulling through and recovering if she had received immediate medical attention. It's unclear if she was conscious at the time, but if she was, seeing rescuers arrive just seconds after the crash would have been a tremendous relief. However, the very people meant to save her life would end up taking it instead. Not long after the crash, Ye was tragically run over by 2 separate fire trucks as they maneuvered around the wreckage to extinguish the fires. Footage from the incident showed a firefighter directing the trucks away from Ye. Unfortunately, in the chaos of the rescue, no one thought to check her vitals and assumed that she had already passed away.
Whoa, stop.
Oh, wow, that's terrible.
There's a body right there, right in front of you.
This led to rescuers ignoring her and focusing on the fire and the other victims. One of the fire trucks also ended up covering her with fire-resistant foam, making her even harder to spot, which ultimately led to 2 different drivers failing to see her on the ground and running her over, removing any chance she had of surviving the crash.
That's terrifying. Yep. Telling you, man. Scary shit. Let's see. Mm. Hmm. I don't know. I really don't know.
Thanks for coming in to talk about Doug Jr.
Of course. Third graders 100 and Liberty Mutual could save you hundreds, but custom...
Maybe not this one. Who knows?
(1-800-GOLF-TIP). Back in the early 90s, a mysterious phone number started popping up on billboards and newspaper ads across North America. It was a vanity number that spelled out 1-800-GOLF-TIP. Seeing this, most people assumed that it was an innocent golf tips helpline or something of the sort. However, that couldn't have been further from the truth. When someone did call the number, they were greeted by the sound of a person breathing into his microphone. This was then quickly followed by the same person counting off numbers 1 through 10 in an Indian or Middle Eastern accent over and over again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 1, 2. This sequence kept repeating for minutes on end, leaving many people confused and prompting them to hang up. However, this counting didn't last forever. People discovered that after about 10 to 12 minutes, the voice faded into silence and was replaced by static noise. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But that wasn't all, because the ones who kept on listening were eventually startled by a loud and unsettling siren sound. Not only was this extremely creepy, it also left the listener with many unanswered questions, like what was the purpose of this strange counting? And why would anyone pay money to advertise this number in the first place? Over the next few years, the 1-800-GOLF-TIP number became a modern folktale of sorts. People heard about it through word of mouth, dialed it out of curiosity, and were all met with the same eerie voice. This phenomenon was widespread enough to become one of the earliest internet rabbit holes, as I found mentions of the number dating as far back as 2003. However, the complete lack of information gave rise to a flood of theories attempting to explain the mystery, including one which speculated if 1-800-GOLF-TIP had something to do with number stations, which, for those who don't know, are shortwave radio broadcasts of unknown origin. These usually transmit sequences of spoken numbers, tones, or coded messages, often in eerie, mechanical voices. Many believe they're used by governments to send encrypted instructions to spies in the field. So, according to this theory, the 1-800-GOLF-TIP number served a similar purpose. Another theory that many came up with was that this number was a part of a marketing campaign, probably to gather working phone numbers for telemarketing later or as a social experiment to generate hype for an upcoming product. However, none of these theories hold up to scrutiny. For starters, if number stations are indeed used to transmit instructions to spies, their entire purpose is to deliver messages anonymously, leaving no trace of who received them. A purpose that's negated completely if the receiver had to call a phone number that could potentially be traced back to them. On the other hand, the marketing and number collection theories don't hold much weight either. There are far more effective ways to achieve both goals without depending on an unlikely chance of the number spreading through word of mouth and attracting calls from curious people. Ultimately, despite many attempts at uncovering the truth, 1-800-GOLF-TIP remained a mystery for nearly 3 decades. That is, until a Reddit user took it upon himself to get to the bottom of it. He spent over 4 years combing through the available leads and gathering personal anecdotes from people who remembered calling this number in their childhood. And as it turns out, the 1-800-GOLF-TIP rabbit hole wasn't a viral hoax or a disturbing conspiracy. Instead, it was the result of a simple mistake. You see, back in 1994, the Professional Golfers Association, or PGA, was touring across North America. And in an effort to promote the sport, they set up billboards and purchased ad space in newspapers, listing their golf tip line 1-800-GOLF-TIP. However, this line was only meant to be active for 2 days, as evident from this 1994 ad in the Tampa Tribune, which reads, Golfers nationwide can receive golf tips today and Sunday via a toll-free instruction hotline presented by the PGA of America and USA Today. The hotline, featuring nearly 100 PGA members, is being offered in conjunction for the Tommy Armour PGA Teaching and Coaching Summit in New Orleans. Call 800-GOLF-TIP. Following the campaign, billboards in low-traffic areas that never received a new ad ended up staying up far longer than intended. However, by then, the tip line was replaced by a placeholder text message from the phone company. As for the disturbing siren sound at the end, it was just one of the many pre-recorded tones phone companies used to signal that the call hadn't reached its intended destination. In the end, 1-800-GOLF-TIP wasn't a covert spy line or a clever marketing ploy. It was simply the byproduct of a phone company forgetting to disconnect a test number. And while the truth isn't as thrilling as some might have hoped, it brought closure to those who spent nearly 30 years chasing the mystery. User 927. On August 4th, 2006, AOL, which was an early search engine like Google, released a text file on its website containing 20 million search queries from its users. These queries were collected from over 650,000 users and spanned a period of about 3 months. Whether this release was intentional or simply a private file mistakenly made public remains unclear. The users' actual names were replaced with anonymous filler numbers starting at 1, so like user 34 or user 152, but based solely on each user's searches, you could usually still find out a lot about them. The company did apologize and remove the file 3 days later, but it was already too late. Thousands of people had already copied the file and began combing through it out of curiosity. And while most of the searches were exactly what you'd expect, like users looking for restaurant recommendations, planning vacations, or searching for medical symptoms, user 927's search history stood out from the rest for just how shockingly disturbing it was. It started off quite normal, with user 927 looking up songs from various artists. There were also some medical queries, such as the time it takes for a broken leg to heal and fungal infections, as well as numerous searches on different types of flowers. But it didn't take long for user 927's searches to shift into the realm of deeply inappropriate and not safe for work. Now, due to the explicit nature of these searches, I can't share them on YouTube, but just note that many of them were deeply unsettling and painted a troubling picture of the user behind them. However, this was only the beginning. As the weeks went on, user 927's searches grew darker, more specific, and far more disturbing. It went from looking up questionable stuff to searching for straight-up illegal and harmful material. The unsettling nature of user 927's search history sparked widespread discussion and concern across the internet, even inspiring an off-Broadway play which delved into themes of cyberstalking, privacy, and the implications of our digital footprints. Despite their infamy, however, user 927 was never identified. All we know is that they were likely from Colorado based on a single search from the state's official government website. It's also likely that these searches were made on a shared family computer, since they often flip-flopped between wholesome searches and illegal not safe for work searches. Apart from that, the identity of user 927 remains a mystery to this day. Google Translate anomalies. Near the end of 2017, a few users on 4chan noticed a bizarre phenomenon with Google Translate, where typing in incoherent and broken strings of characters led to eerily normal-sounding responses. For instance, typing the letter O and P repeatedly resulted in Google Translate telling the user to click on the image to view more. Similarly, using P and S instead produced something that resembled a snippet from an email. Now, it would have been easy to write it off as a coincidence, just random characters accidentally forming something familiar, but as more people tested it, the more weirdly consistent the outputs became, like the Translate app telling the user to go ahead and ask any questions they might have, or in some instances, telling them that they have a chronic disease, a tendency to be infected with the virus, and that they will have a lot of pain. How could a nonsensical mix of characters produce such specific and sometimes threatening translations? At this point, the most reasonable explanation was that this was simply a glitch, perhaps an obscure bug in Google's Translate system. After all, most of these eerie translations occurred specifically when converting between Somali and English, suggesting a potential flaw in how the algorithm handled that language pair. But what made this seem unlikely was the amount of unique information Google Translate was showing in response to these requests, including things like a link to a Facebook post or what appeared to be an email address. In a similar vein, a few specific combinations also provided results that read like a private conversation between two people, stating things like, "You will be given the opportunity to be re-elected," and "This is a great way for you to come to our country." So, what is going on here? Unfortunately, despite the online interest, Google never acknowledged the problem, so we can only speculate. And while I did come across some wild theories suggesting that Google Translate was somehow a sentient AI trying to communicate outside of its intended purpose, these theories are of course not true. One possible theory is that this was the work of a rogue Google employee, someone who out of frustration or boredom decided to tamper with the system. Maybe they were trying to degrade the app's quality out of spite, or perhaps they simply wanted to leave behind a hidden Easter egg for others to discover. However, someone risking their lucrative career at Google for something this uneventful and niche is fairly hard to justify. From everything I've seen, the most plausible explanation is still the one mentioned earlier, that all of this was just a glitch or an overlooked bug in the system. As for the oddly specific bits of information, those could have come from any number of internal sources. Consider this: massive platforms like Gmail, Google Drive, and Search process billions of data points every day. So it's not hard to imagine a coding error causing Google Translate to inadvertently pull fragments from those interconnected services, which, if true, would be a real security and privacy threat. That said, I tried replicating the troubling prompts myself and came up empty. Whatever was causing the bizarre outputs seems to have been quietly patched out by Google since the story first broke out. Ted the Caver. On March 23, 2001, a man named Ted began sharing his caving experience in an online journal. The story started a few months earlier in December 30th, 2000, when Ted and his friend B were exploring a cave they thought they knew well. But on this particular trip, they found something unexpected: a small hole on a wall near the cave's lowest point. As Ted kneeled down to get a closer look inside, he felt a faint breeze coming from the hole, suggesting there might be an entire unexplored cave system lying just beyond the narrow opening. The excitement of being the first people to explore this new section of the cave outweighed the inherent danger of venturing into the unknown. After surveying the area, Ted and B decided to widen the hole and carve out a passable corridor. About a month later, on the 27th of January, they began to chisel at the rock. But something felt strange. The two felt a suspiciously strong wind coming from the hole, followed by low, ominous rumbling from deep within the cave. They tried to rationalize these occurrences, thinking that the wind was just blowing a little stronger outside, and that the rumbling noise was coming from the trucks driving on the mountain road above the cave. So, despite the noise growing louder and more frequent, they pressed on. A decision they'd come to regret, as the sense of unease kept getting worse, fueled by a series of increasingly disturbing occurrences, like their dog becoming agitated as soon as it reached the cave and refused to go anywhere near the hole, or the two hearing what Ted described as the most terrible scream he has ever heard from the hole, lasting nearly 10 seconds. Once the hole was big enough, Ted crawled through to the other side, only to be met by a massive, unnaturally round boulder sitting in the center of a small chamber. There were also hieroglyph-like drawings on the walls depicting people standing around a strange symbol. He took photos on his disposable Polaroid camera and came back. But when he tried to develop those pictures later that day, every photo he took of the round rock and its surroundings came out completely blank. They then tried recruiting another experienced caver, Joe, hoping a fresh perspective might help. However, Joe returned minutes after he went in, visibly shaken by the experience. He refused to speak about what he saw on the other side, and just stated that he would never enter that hole again. Left with no other choice, Ted decided to explore the new area himself. But as soon as he reached the other side, he began hearing the rock scraping sound again. He panicked and ran for the exit, only to see the round rock in a different position than it originally was. As he crawled through the hole, a nauseating stench began to fill the cave. Then, just as he and B reached the entrance, something tugged on their rope. In a panic, B slashed it with his knife, sending whatever was climbing up crashing back into the darkness. Yet, their story doesn't end there. In his May 19, 2001 update, Ted talked about their plans to go back fully equipped, to solve the mystery and capture definitive proof of the insides with photos and video footage. However, the updates never came, leaving readers to wonder what happened to Ted and B. Now, I should mention that back then, many online communities were skeptical about the authenticity of this story and internet rabbit hole. However, the irregular updates and accompanying photos were convincing enough to make many believe the story was real. But the story was completely fake. Back then, internet creepypastas, or fake horror stories presented as true, weren't really a thing, or at least weren't very common. Many people had no reason not to believe this story. Nowadays, the Ted the Caver story is often referred to as the internet's first creepypasta. In 2004, he joined a discussion about his story on a forum site and admitted he made it up. Apparently, they did explore the cave and actually took the pictures he posted on his journal, but everything about the round boulder, the drawings on the wall, and the chase at the end was completely fictional. However, none of this detracted from its position as the story that introduced the internet to creepypastas, a genre that's prevalent to this day. The Glitter Conspiracy. On the 21st of December 2018, New York Times posted an article titled, "What is Glitter?" This was supposed to be nothing more than an educational article on what glitter is and where it's used in our day-to-day lives. However, what its author didn't realize at the time was that this would ignite one of the most heavily debated rabbit holes in internet history. It started with an odd conversation between the article's writer and a manager from GlitterX, which is one of the largest glitter manufacturers in the US. When I asked Miss Dyer if she could tell me which industry served as GlitterX's biggest market, her answer was instant. "No, I absolutely know I can't." I was taken aback. "But you know what it is?" "Oh god, yes," she said and laughed. "You would never guess it. Let's just leave it at that." I asked if she could tell me why she couldn't tell me. "Because they don't want you to know that it's glitter. If I looked at it, I wouldn't know it was glitter?" "No, not really." "Would I be able to see the glitter?" "Oh, you'd be able to see something, but yeah, I can." The writer then asked if she could tell the buyer's name off record, but she refused completely. Not long after the article went live, someone posted their strange conversation on the Unresolved Mysteries subreddit, sparking a wave of speculation about who this mysterious client could be. One of the top comments under this post pointed towards a potential use by law enforcement as an ID for explosives, reading, "Micro-taggins. Multi-layered micro-glitter added to all commercial explosives. Simple to batch trace on-site after the detonation using only a microscope. Use dynamite for illegal purposes and leave evidence as clear as a fingerprint. Law enforcement probably don't want this fact circulating." And while this made some logical sense, others leaned toward crazier, conspiracy-adjacent theories. Like, this one user claimed that the government spreads glitter on beaches to increase their sparkle and by extension attract more tourists. A few people also suggested that the mystery buyer could be the US military, since glitter's reflective properties might make it useful for camouflaging equipment by deflecting radar signals. One user proposed a more unsettling theory, that GlitterX's biggest client could be a toothpaste company, using glitter to create the illusion of sparkling clean teeth. While the idea sounds absurd at first, it's not entirely out of the realm of possibility given how common microplastics are in personal care products. However, none of these theories hold much merit. Microplastics in personal care products, including toothpastes, were banned back in July 2017, over a year before the New York Times interview. The military contract theory is also completely detached from the truth. In reality, the radar-absorbing coating used for fighter jets is made from iron and ferrite, not shiny plastics. So, while these theories were fascinating to sift through, none of them actually answered the one question that started it all. Who was buying all the glitter? This remained a mystery for almost an entire year before someone managed to uncover the truth. On the 8th of November 2019, the Endless Thread podcast dropped an episode titled The Great Glitter Mystery, and this had the answer people were looking for. Apparently, the answer was boat manufacturers. This might sound odd at first, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you consider the shimmering, reflective paint used on many newer boats. As for why GlitterX might be so secretive about the identity of their biggest client, one plausible reason could be environmental concerns. Glitter, especially the traditional kind made from microplastics, has been heavily criticized for its contribution to pollution, particularly in oceans where it can be harmful to marine life. So if it came out that companies were using it in boat paint and releasing untold amounts of microplastics into the ocean, it could spark public backlash or calls for regulation. In the end, the truth behind the glitter conspiracy was a lot more mundane than secret military contracts or explosive detection, leaving many to express their disappointment online. Polybius. Polybius is the name of a rumored arcade game that had a limited release in 1981 and has since been lost to time. As the story goes, a single cabinet of the game was installed in a random arcade in Portland, Oregon in 1981. The cabinet was plain without any fancy graphics on the sides, and the gameplay was described as weird and puzzle-like with action elements. This gameplay is also rumored to be surprisingly addictive. There are reports of teens spending hours playing this game to the point of getting dizzy and even fainting. However, there were also several claims suggesting that the dizziness and fainting were actually side effects of government-led mind control experiments conducted through the game. You see, according to the myth, men dressed in black suits would regularly visit the arcade, not to play Polybius, but to collect data from the machine, like on behalf of the CIA or some other three-letter agency. The cabinet also reportedly remained in arcades for only a brief period before mysteriously disappearing without a trace. This mix of addictive gameplay, side effects like amnesia and nightmares, combined with the alleged Men in Black sightings, cemented Polybius in urban legend history. But here's the thing, there's no concrete proof the game ever actually existed. No official records, no contemporary newspaper articles, nothing verifiable from 1981 mentions it. The only, quote, real evidence of its existence is this screenshot of the title screen, which looks a bit too advanced for its era, and this grainy black and white picture of an allegedly real Polybius cabinet. The high noise, overblown exposure, and overall low resolution makes it near impossible to extract any details. However, given the overall shape of the cabinet, this was likely a repurposed Namco cabinet with its stickers removed. And even if these images are real, there are no sources dating back to the 1980s that could verify their authenticity. In fact, from what I was able to find, one of the earliest mentions of Polybius in any gaming magazine or website was in the year 2000 on a website called coinop.org. The legend did become widespread enough to inspire enthusiasts into building their own real-life Polybius arcade cabinets. However, I wasn't able to find a single piece of evidence matching its original description. So, where did the story come from? It's likely a fascinating case of collective memory blending fact and fiction. As a comment on Reddit noted, Polybius wasn't real, but it was inspired by stories of surreal 80s vector games, people playing arcade games for too long and getting sick, and teens doing shady things that resulted in authorities coming into arcades. Think of it this way, the early 80s saw visually intense vector graphic games like Tempest, which could be quite disorienting, especially in a dimly lit, smoke-filled arcade. Arcades were also rowdy places where teenagers pushed boundaries, sometimes prompting authorities to monitor them for reasons like truancy or gambling. It's plausible that these separate, real occurrences, getting eye strain from a vector game, feeling ill after a marathon session, seeing officials in an arcade, morphed and merged over time into the singular, terrifying narrative of Polybius. Or it's also possible that the Polybius myth was the masterwork of a single, imaginative individual. Someone who managed to craft one of the most talked about rabbit holes in the history of internet gaming folklore. The Box of Crazy. On November 4th, 2013, Reddit user TramStopDan posted an Imgur album on the What's in This Thing subreddit titled, "Large Box Full of Odd Illustrations of an Event, aka The Box of Crazy, Found by the Trash Bins." On the surface, this looked like nothing more than an antique wooden briefcase. However, its contents told a completely different story. Inside, there were hundreds of documents containing text records of alleged UFO sightings, diagrams and schematics for complex otherworldly machinery, and hand-drawn illustrations of disturbing demonic creatures. The box also contained a lot of handwritten notes from the creator of all these illustrations, Daniel Christensen, as well as several maps and globe projections. Much of it was cryptic and difficult to decipher. However, even after reviewing just a small portion, it became clear that this was the work of someone who was deeply unwell. Some of his notes hinted at the possibility of him being a World War II veteran, which could explain the origin of his mental illness. However, that wasn't what started his fascination with aliens and extraterrestrial life forms. Some of the earliest documents in the box were from 1937, with some of the newest ones dating to 1977. In other words, Daniel remained fixated on this topic for over 4 decades. However, his earlier work was a lot tamer and more legible than whatever he came up with in his later years, hinting at his deteriorating mental health. As for the actual contents of this box, however, one particular topic stood out above the rest: his account of the incident that happened on July 7th, 1977. According to Daniel, Tampa Bay was hit by a tornado on that day, but that tornado was just to disguise alien ships used to make contact with Earth without getting spotted. He created several detailed illustrations of what he saw that day, and it's bizarre to say the least. In reality, there were no records of a tornado or any other extreme weather event happening in Tampa Bay on the 7th of July. That said, Daniel didn't choose this day at random. You see, a lot of Daniel's illustrations of the 7th of July include this same building as the center point for alien descent. This was the inverted pyramid on the St. Petersburg Pier in Tampa. Coincidentally, this building was also lit up with a massive laser light show installation on July 7th, 1977. So it's highly likely that Daniel witnessed this laser show, misinterpreted it as an alien encounter, and then spiraled into an obsession to document what he genuinely believed was a life-changing event. And the craziest part is, this was only a fraction of the work he'd produced in his lifetime. This is because as the story gained traction online, a Reddit user named That's My Box came forward, claiming that she was the previous owner of the wooden box Tram Stop Dan found. And apparently she was telling the truth. She moved into a new home in the 90s where she found a room full of Daniel's work. This included a chair-like machine he'd constructed, which according to his notes was the device he'd used for an out-of-body experience and time travel. Unfortunately, most of Daniel's stuff had to be thrown out, which is how Tram Stop Dan found the box. It really makes you wonder what other mind-bending contraptions, bizarre concepts, or odd events he might have noted down on paper during his lifetime. Eritas. On November 5th, 2015, an anonymous user posted a thread on 4chan talking about a strange conversation they had with a girl at work. The girl he talked with was, at the time, homeless and in a band. She also worked for a really shady company that was in the process of closing down. One day, her supervisors gave her and another employee 2 tape guns and instructed them to pack boxes. However, the tape in one of these guns had the word Eritas written on it. When she inquired about this word, her coworker told her to get rid of the tape gun and to not mention the word to any of the supervisors. Apparently, he used to work in IT, and one of his jobs was to flag employees who searched this term so they could be fired. The OP was curious about what Eritas meant. However, this was also the first time other 4chan users had encountered the word, so they couldn't offer much help in figuring out what it meant either. But then a month later, on December 19th, another anonymous user brought up Eritas again, hinting that it was some HR-related computer program. But this time the OP received an answer, which defined Eritas as a program that allows some specific third-party company unconditional access to employee information. This reply also mentioned major brands like UPS, Unilever, and Ecolab. About one more month later, on January 25th, a user on the music board talked about wanting to make music from obscure YouTube videos. They also included a list of video links they were interested in. The second of these links led to a video titled "YouTube is monitoring and controlling my life" that was posted just 2 days before the 4chan post. The owner of the channel that posted this video, Chronos for Life Jurassic Park, believed that he was being targeted by Eritas. This, along with a now-deleted Q&A video Chronos posted later, gave people a clearer picture of Eritas' true nature. Eritas, as many came to understand it, was a mass surveillance and censorship software allegedly used by powerful entities to securely monitor the public. What made Eritas so terrifyingly effective was its ability to erase its own existence. It would detect any time someone mentioned it across the internet and remove that reference without a trace. Chronos even posted a video titled "Here Goes Nothing" as bait for Eritas, hoping the advanced algorithm would target and delete the video, thereby proving it was real. But that wasn't all. Turning on captions revealed that the video also had hidden messages at several points throughout its runtime. Decoding these messages led to a fake address that was listed on the profile of a band called KFC Murder Chicks. This band featured homeless girls, and surprisingly, one of them reportedly worked in a warehouse, just like the mysterious girl who told the first 4chan user about Eritas. Looking further into this band revealed a YouTube upload of one of their songs which had the word Eritas in its description as well. The channel that uploaded this video, Todd Ellsworth, also had a relatively empty Twitter account with the word. The only noteworthy post on this account was this creepy, elongated portrait of a man. By this point, many people who were following the mystery assumed that Todd and the KFC Chicks band had something to do with Eritas. Or at least they knew something about this advanced algorithm that no one else did. But when asked about it, they denied having any knowledge about the term. Unfortunately, that's where the lead stopped. Users had so much information and connection points between various groups and people, but it led to nowhere. This left Eritas as just another unsolved mystery of the internet. That is until August 2020, when a YouTuber called Toxicologist managed to get an interview with a person named DJ Roswell. As it turned out, Roswell was behind everything from the very beginning. He was the leader of the KFC Murder Chicks band and wanted to promote his band with an ARG. So he was the one who created the lore surrounding Eritas and every puzzle piece connecting to it. As for this unsettling image, this turned out to just be a police sketch of a horrible criminal from Hawaii that had nothing to do with the band or the ARG. Roswell just used this picture because it was attention-grabbing. Unfortunately for Roswell, people weren't able to progress through the storyline fast enough, and many lost interest over time, giving a tragically mundane ending to the mystery of Eritas. Alan Tutorial. In June 2011, a YouTube channel called Alan Tutorial uploaded its first video called How to Leak on a Piece of Paper. This 1 minute and 15-second video didn't make any logical sense and was just a jumbled mess of random actions.
You rip off a piece of paper, and you're gonna put the paper on the floor. Next thing you do is you gotta take the fork, and you're gonna have to ram a hole inside.
The channel began producing videos of obscure tutorials, like teaching users how to make a windmill from household items, or how to fill a tiny bin with dirt. However, as time went on, users began to notice the mental health of the creator, Alan, begin to deteriorate. He went from gleefully explaining some illogical concept to crying during tutorials and getting accidentally hurt while trying to make the video. This marked a shifting point in the channel where it went from silly to often downright disturbing, and no video encapsulates this better than the one titled Disc Tutorial. It shows the host, Alan, getting kidnapped in a truck and slipping over his own blood, all while trying to make his usual tutorial. Even in captivity, Alan continued creating content with whatever he had access to, at one point even resorting to reading the news on camera just to stay connected with his audience. All of this, of course, turned out to be nothing more than a fictional storyline created by art student Alan Resnick. And while many of his longtime viewers understood this, newer viewers stumbling across his uploads out of context often couldn't make sense of what they were watching, with a concerned comment under the Disc Tutorial video reading, "Either this guy is a brilliant actor / art student, or something weird is happening and none of us suspect anything because we all think he's a brilliant actor / art student. I'm starting to have my doubts." All of this came to an end in December of 2014 when Alan posted his final video simply titled Tutorial, a nearly 2-minute upload in which Alan finds a way to bust through a wall and escape his captor, never to be seen again. Ever since this conclusion, fans have gone back and analyzed each video to find the hidden meaning and bits of lore. According to the most popular interpretation, the character Alan Resnick created suffers from autism and was living with his older brother and his girlfriend who didn't like him. This explains why he ends up homeless at one point as his uncaring family kicks him out. Some users have also speculated that the reason he's crying in the blue chair tutorial video is because it reminds him of the way he found his mother after her death. This theory is supported by the video's description, which reads, "If your chair is on the floor, here's how you get it back and pick up all the pieces of something broken and unfair." However, creator Alan Resnick has never confirmed or denied any of these theories, choosing to leave his years-long art project open for interpretation instead. This House Has People in It. This House Has People in It is an analog horror short film that was aired on Adult Swim back in March 2016. The short is often known for just how weird and disturbing its concept is. It was directed by Alan Resnick, the creator and actor of the Alan Tutorial channel we just discussed. Though, unlike Alan Tutorial, which started off a bit lighthearted and slowly descended into absolute madness, This House Has People in It wastes no time pulling viewers into its surreal, unsettling world. It starts with the footage of someone logging into a computer and choosing a specific video to play. The footage then cuts to the CCTV feed from a house with 9 cameras, and then cuts again to the main couple, Tom and Ann, arguing about where to go for vacation.
No, it's not that expensive. Orlando's expensive. All the hotels and all the...
And immediately something is extremely wrong with the situation as we see a person lying on the kitchen floor while the couple ignores them completely. From there, we also see a repairman working in the basement and the son Jackson watching TV in the living room that is decorated for his birthday. We also learn that the person lying on the kitchen floor is Tom and Ann's teenage daughter, Madison. She had a fight with Ann 2 hours ago and has been lying there in anger ever since. After a few minutes, Tom tries to pick Madison up, only to make a disturbing discovery.
It is time.
What? Prime links. That is disgusting.
Madison appears to be completely stuck on the floor. The situation then goes from bad to horrific as Madison starts sinking through the kitchen floor. The repairman tries to help by putting a plank on Madison's face to stop her from sinking through. However, that does not work, resulting in Tom having a complete meltdown in the basement.
I'm ready for it, are you? I'm ready for anything. You've always been so beautiful.
You need to stop right now!
I praise you. I serve you.
Left with no other option, they make a final-ditch effort to save their daughter by placing a mattress underneath her. We eventually see Madison fall onto the mattress, which then immediately cuts to a shot of the mattress without her, implying that she fell through the basement floor as well. The short ends with the guests who gathered for Jackson's birthday lying down in the yard just like Madison, while Tom and Ann are freaking out inside. The short seems to carry a major theme of neglect that's prevalent throughout. For instance, we see Madison lie on the kitchen floor for 2 hours before Tom and Ann talk directly to her. Jackson is completely neglected by his parents. The baby doesn't have food in her bowl, and when Tom hands the baby to Grandma, she immediately sets it down, which ultimately results in her crawling out of the house. As a comment on YouTube puts it, I think the title, "This House Has People in It," is referring to this is a house, not a home. We are just people who live together, not a family. However, this was just the tip of the iceberg. You see, this short was released with a now defunct website called absurveillancesolutions.com. Visiting this site unlocked a fully functional ARG, which in turn unlocked hours of additional footage, dozens of images, and even chat logs between the family. Viewers also uncovered additional plot points hidden within the extended media, including one about a mysterious disease slowly spreading throughout the world of the film. It's so extensive that even 9 years after its release, fans still aren't sure if they've uncovered everything hidden within it.
I am back, and that was some pretty fucked up shit, but I'm going to be heading off for now. I hope all of you had a wonderful, wonderful night. And that you take care of yourself. Very important. And yeah, please follow me on all platforms.